but then also what becomes really important in North Wales recovery community is that some of the other visions really start to happen for James, you know, and I think for me, it's coming back to the connection. We were talking about the national movement. When did I really get the sense that this community was doing some different things? And that was before we got to this COVID episode and High Street Cafe, maybe 2 years before. But James had started to have this notion that, you know, this idea about making recovery visible in Recovery Month, but also about challenging stigma and the aspirations. He started setting the residents or the recovery community these 100 miles in a week challenge, you know. And if you think about it, it's a bonkers statement. I'm going to get a bunch of, you know, again, coming to those headlines, you know, recovery addicts walk 100 miles. You know, these two things don't go together in people's minds, you know. And very importantly, they were, of course, the literal and the metaphor, you know, so they become the metaphor, you know, literally. It's like, you know, I always talk to people about it in terms of the hill stuff. If you, you know, if you can walk up the mountain, it's something of the metaphor of the mountains you're climbing in recovery, but actually you also get the same physical reward and stimulation from it. So all these things were going on. And yeah, and James started to get 12, 13 people get in a minibus, go away, and yeah, well, you know, one year you got 12 people in a minibus, go away, and they walked Hadrian's Wall in a week, you know, and stuff like that. And and you suddenly started to realise that what was going on was very, very different. You know, there were again pre-COVID, there became quarterly pop-up sober social evenings, and they were really nice, and they would be, you know, the residents, they would be all three of those communities would come together. There would be the residents, there'd be the external wider community and some of their family, but then there'd be the friends of recovery, and people would get together in the evening, and there'd be shared food and music, and just, I think, just stuff in a way, you know, when you walked into Penryn, it had all those things that you don't normally expect to see in a way, and you've been there and visited. So the whole of it's downstairs is just a completely open space, and you know, the residential rehab bedroom bit of it, no one else sees unless you happen to live there. Yes. And it's like even in one space it becomes two halves. There's almost like a recovery community, a community hub with a residential bit stuck on top of it. It's not, you know. Yeah. So lots of things really happen, really, and there are good supporters along the way. Early on, James had two very robust trustees, which I think he needed to have. They were highly sought after professional individuals, and over time, you know, the current trustees are much closer to friends and supporters of the recovery community. But now the trustees have been re-expanded because of the complexity of the organisation to actually include the friends of recovery, the lay people, but with the real expertise in law and finance, which is required now and stuff. Yeah, so, you know, in each bits of the organisation, you can see all these kind of changes that go on as it has to grow, really, to arrive at the brilliant position of, you know, it is at the moment, you know, and the last bit of that sequence, and I don't know if James has talked to you about it, but the last bit of that sequence has been this year for North Wales recovery communities to almost go back to the initial vision in itself, that it's the umbrella recovery, you know, it's the glue that brings the stuff together. But even of the direct North Wales recovery activity, we've now separated those off into three different legal community interest companies rather than being one shared, to allow, you know, different things to go on. So it was all one legal entity, and now we've got the residential as one part, the cafe as one part, and the growing as one part. And
okay. That's good.
And that's important because we've grown to a place where, you know, and you can't have, you and I have touched on these, but you can't have any of these conversations. And it was really important to James. You can't have any of these conversations without understanding financially how you're going to make them sustainable at some level. They, you know, you can't do it in the 21st century with zero money. You can do it with a lot less than others, and you know, and the third sector has always been far more famous for, you know, every £1 you give to the statutory sector, the third sector probably can do the same for 25p or something silly. I don't know what the maths are, but I'm sure it's there. But as the organisation has grown and it become very close to having £1 million threshold, that excludes it from the much softer, smaller types of income and ways in which it needs to operate. And to go back to having 3 different organisations rather than one allows each of them to, you know, to be far more flexible. The whole North Wales recovery community, but, you know, James specifically, but the trustees, we are really conscious of keep reminding ourselves not to become the organisation that we were almost set up in antithesis to. So we don't want to be one of those. It's very important, and it's part of that journey. And it's not easy to be true to that when so much of the potential funding that helps us survive, and not just survive, but then enables us to do the stuff that makes a difference, is compromised sometimes, or comes with caveats or clauses that, you know, and we have this wider expression that we use a lot, which is about, you know, which of the king's shillings basically can you take? Yes, you know, none of it comes without clauses and caveats and compromise, but it's about being conscious which ones you take and which ones you don't take, in a way. Yes, James and I always had the conversation, let's just keep doing what we know to be right, and if we do it right, people will come and hopefully give us money to do what we want to do, rather than we have to get their money to do their bidding. And that has happened for North Wales Recovery from time to time, and in its last phase, as you well know, you know, we've stepped into a space where we've got several very big local businesses that, you know, nothing to do with the drug and alcohol world, even the health sector, anything to do with that. These are other you know, corporate world that have just said, we really like what you're doing for the individuals in the community. How can we support you with all our financial muscle? How can we give you philanthropic money with no interest in wanting to influence the direction of the journey, because they don't understand that at all. They're not coming with an alternative that says, oh, this is the psychiatrist way of doing it, or this is the criminal justice way of doing it, or the health service, because they don't know any of that. They only know what they've seen, and they like what they see, and they want to support it. So but you need luck and chance. There's been an 8-year journey in which the organisation may have easily and may still yet collapse financially. It remains a knife edge, despite, you know, despite being a community at this point in time, you know, of, I gotta say, it's a good 200 people in North Wales that are really directly connected in and out of, you know, Penryn and North Wales, maybe even a touch more, that are all sustaining long-term recovery.
Wow, that's
you know,
incredible.
it's a huge number, and we're all local.